started? Okay. Welcome, everybody. Thank you to coming to the school board's workshop on our new security action protocol that we're going to receive a report from. I'm going to hand it over to Howard to explain the rest.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Howard Coulter. I'm your superintendent. And I wanted to kind of just outline what we think of as being the format for this evening. We initially were going to just devote the entire presentation tonight to the board on a strategy for enhancing safety for our students and employees. It's called ALICE, the program that we're talking about. But we realized with all this that is going on in our state and in the nation regarding schools being safe for everybody, we thought that tonight would be important to really devote a lot of this meeting for an opportunity to hear from you any ideas or concerns or questions that you may have, do our best to try and answer those questions that we can answer. Hopefully you understand that some questions you may ask we aren't going to answer because there are certain things that we do that we have to keep to ourselves. We don't want to make public a lot of details of our strategies. You I'm sure realize that, but nonetheless, we're going to get into that part of the meeting, the questions and answers, in a bit. We want to take maybe a half an hour total of this meeting to present information about ALICE, and then for the board to be able to ask whatever questions that they want, and perhaps you as well. And then we're going to shift into allowing the majority of this meeting really be questions and answers with you about school safety. Does that sound okay, everybody?
Yes.
Any concerns about that agenda? Okay, great. So let me just say that I think it was either September or October of last year we started meeting about our emergency response plan for our school district. And we started meeting once a month, and we have never backed off of that. We've been meeting regularly for over a year and a half now. And starting this year, a number of us that are on that larger committee have been meeting weekly between the monthly meetings. So you can believe that we're giving a lot of thought to what we can do to enhance safety in our schools. And I feel that we've come a long way in the last year and a half, and no small thanks to our police chief, who happens to be here this evening, Chief Williams, but also the fire chief and his crew, a lot of our staff, all of our nurses, all of our administrators. People have been taking this seriously way before this last wave or two of tragedies across our country. So we realized some time ago that we wanted to be more prepared than we were, and we are. That doesn't mean that we want to ever let down on this. We want to keep the commitment and the rhythm going, but just be assured of that. Maybe last spring, a number of people in our district had heard about some different ways that we could strengthen and enhance our response to emergencies. Not just the ones that we all are so aware of, the ones about these terrible shootings in schools, but any number of emergencies. And it was a program, you're going to hear about what the acronym stands for, but it's ALICE. That's the name of this thing. And so all of our assistant principals and all of our school nurses volunteered to sign up for this several-day training. It was offered, I think, somewhere up by Lewiston. I'm not sure if I've got that right, but upstate. And everybody came back with a lot of enthusiasm for what is potential in this in these enhancements. And that's what you're going to hear about in a minute from Mr. Carpenter, who's the high school assistant principal. So let me just pass it to him right now. He and our nurses are do you want to, do you want me to introduce? Oh, okay. Do you want to introduce everybody? Are you going to do that?
Well, very informally, it's Jill, it's Aaron, it's Devin, it's I. Doug Curley is also involved in this.
That's right.
And the presentation you're about to just sort of gain a little bit of glimmer into is from August, and we were in Bedford. We met with, predominantly, it was law enforcement personnel, and they were very excited that we were there. We were one of the few schools that were there. It was mostly law enforcement dealing with this issue. But we decided, even though that we feel very confident in our emergency practices, we were always looking for ways to update and think of new progressive ways to do things better and create best practice for ourselves. So we all decided to go, and I'd love to give you just a brief overview of what we saw.
Are you going to introduce everybody? Oh, you did?
I could do it very quickly.
Why don't we introduce
One
ourselves?
sentence.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm Jill Young, the nurse at the middle school.
Erin Taylor, nurse at the elementary school.
Deb Braxton, high school nurse.
Yeah.
Nate Carpenter, assistant principal at the high school.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So go right ahead, please.
So I guess we will begin. We learned a lot on those 2 days in that training, and you can go to the first one. And what we learned, or I have learned in the process of the last 3.5 years, that the state of Maine basically mandates that every school have a crisis response plan for everything that you can think of in that realm, whether it be fire, shelter in place, and lockdown. And what's frustrating for me as an administrator is you sort of have to come up and figure out what best practice looks like for your school, working in contingency with like local law enforcement. So it's a little bit of a nebulous sort of thing to try to pin down what best practice looks like. But we've attempted to do that, and state law dictates that we do that. The origin of lockdown, we learned, really is sort of an outdated concept. It started in the 1970s in Southern California when they started to see a significant amount of drive-by shootings with gangs and gang violence. So they came up with a very simple sort of plan where shut your windows, turn the lights off, lock the doors, and get behind cinder block walls, and that was the first lockdown. And ironically, that's the lockdown that's sort of evolved and been adapted from every public education institution in the country. And it's kind of weird to think that that's the origin of where it all came from. Since 1970, there's been very little movement from lock the doors, shut the windows, turn the blinds and lights off, and remain quiet and do nothing. So a lockdown typically occurs when your school or any public institution is in a threatening situation, armed intruder or the like. There is no national practice that's widely accepted. Like I said, it's between local law enforcement and each school, which makes it very difficult sometimes to pin down what looks best. And these are designed essentially, and they vary from school district to school district. So we keep looking for best practice, what other schools do, and I think we're starting to creep closer to what best practice looks like. Once again, since 1970, this has been the standard. You take the curtains and you shut them, you shut the windows, the lights go off, you get down on the floor away from windows and doors and any openings, and you basically try to hide behind the most protective walls, and in doing this you lock all doors. So it's very rudimentary practice. So, like I said, we meet once a week, we meet once a month as a district, and how can we just do this better? We always want to keep student safety at the forefront. So by going here, we found out that ALICE training really in essence is doing what we already do, but it allows the opportunity for teachers to be a little bit more empowered in the decision-making process. A lot of it comes down to information flow and making sure that what's going on and where it's going in is very, very important in this process. But obviously, in the beginning stages of where we're at, there's a lot of training that will be involved here. So, what we realized, in any moment of decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing, the next best thing you can do is the wrong thing, and the worst thing you can do is nothing. And what we've realized in this process is just so hard to wade through what best practice is. We're just trying to use this as our mantra to make good decisions going forward, and doing nothing would be the worst case scenario. And that's what much of the country is really doing, is just following those original lockdown procedures. This is a pretty sobering thought, but it's true. Oftentimes we talk about first responders, but the true first responders in any lockdown situation are the students and staff that are already first presented with a situation that exists. And we'll explain that a little bit more. Typically, a single shooter shooting is responsible for 98% of active shooters. That means it's one person 98% of the time that invades a school setting and does this horrific type of crime. On average, one round is fired every 15 seconds. 5 to 9 minutes is the lasting time of any type of crisis that occurs. The average national response time is 5 to 6 minutes before the local police or law enforcement would arrive. We've sort of suggested that our response for KPD obviously can't be guaranteed, but would be 2 to 3 minutes. Approximately 50% of the time, shooting is still underway when the law enforcement arrives. Since 2013, there have been over 200 school shootings in America, an average of nearly 1 a week, which we found to be incredibly sobering. And if you look more locally, Maine schools with gun threats, even over the last couple months, Thompson, Lewiston, MDI, it's obviously hitting much closer to home, okay? What was learned in our training was a couple valuable lessons from two national tragedies, this one being Virginia Tech. When they looked at the data and researched what happened during the crisis, they recognized what the responses were in various settings. For instance, if you look, passive response, which meant people just waiting, shutting the doors, locking the doors, and just waiting for the intruder to come, go, or do whatever, 28 people in the passive situations lost their lives. Whereas people who tended to be more proactive, we saw them having more success in the data down here. For instance, in this room, where there were 19 people present, the people that barricaded the doors or jumped out the windows, those were the situations of fatalities. Here, where they stayed and did nothing, you can see much more drastic results. So what we're trying to prove with this very simplistic data is Virginia Tech showed law enforcement that if you just waited it out, it didn't play out to your benefit. And if you took proactive steps, for instance, barricading the room, you saw much more successful situations result from them. Then you move to Columbine, which is the next slide, and what national law enforcement would suggest, and this isn't centered very well, but you have the two intruders that would enter the library right here, the two young men who perpetrated this crime. You notice in an audio rendition of this, what happened is the librarian says, get under the desk, which all students did because it was the directive order of the adult in charge. They all hid underneath their desks, and when the two perpetrators walked in, unfortunate things obviously occurred. What law enforcement suggested is they should have and could have all evacuated out of the library and took off to different parts of the building, if not outside the building, to get away from harm's way. So those two situations, Virginia Tech and Columbine, proved, in essence, if you try to protect yourself and you barricade yourself in the room and or leave as a result of Columbine, you'd be best suited for success in these horrible situations. So the basic concept of ALICE is information is key. Wherever there's a threat in the building, you implore your staff to share it, make sure they spread the word of what's the threat, who the person is, what are they wearing, what do they look like, and what's happening, and then the rest of this decision can basically make good decisions because of it. They can still choose to lock down. If this threat promotes that they have to sort of stay put, lock the doors, shut the windows, turn the lights off, etc., like we already do, and that's the best choice, you do it. As I've already said, information is the key, and sharing it is a very big part of this. Another thing is, if you have a situation where you can evacuate, you basically teach and you show your staff and your students where to evacuate, how to evacuate, and where to congregate off-site when it's all concluded. And the worst case situation is, if someone does invade your space, you don't just sit and wait. You do anything you can to distract the shooter or the intruder in any way, shape, or form. Understanding that most intruders are very untrained. They're very much can be easily distracted. They're not professionals in what they're doing. And the concept is, even the throwing of erasers or the yelling and screaming can distract any type of intruder or shooter and make you obviously be able to save yourself in that situation. Another strategy that's very similar to ALICE is simply called Run, Hide, and Fight, and that's just another program that is very, very similar by nature. So when we talk about changes to Cape Elizabeth High School, it really comes down to, we already do in our trainings and suggested trainings, we always try to talk about how information can be shared the best possible way. We have a program that's called Share 911, which is the application on all teachers' phones and on their computers, and it allows them to communicate what's going on, what students they have or don't have with them. It's like a bookkeeping system, but it also allows us to share information. PA announcements and basically text and emergency notifications. What we're saying is we just want to start sharing as much information as we can with our staff when a crisis occurs, instead of holding it in one specific place. Same thing with lockdowns. We want to basically teach teachers and students how to better secure their rooms if they are locked in there, moving drawers, moving cabinets, bookcases, etc., how to tie off doors. All we're trying to do is encourage conversations, and kids are already having them, just about what would you do if you were in a room where this stuff was going on. And then the last thing which we need with training to think about is, if you have the opportunity, for instance, something's happening on the 3rd floor up near the main office, and we were to go into a crisis situation, it doesn't make any sense for someone on the 1st floor down by Jim Ray or the gymnasium to lock their door, shut the door, and hide when they could much more easily flee the building and go to an identified area where we would track them down and make sure everybody was safe. Okay. All right, so that would be that. So, as I've already said, we're looking just to improve our practice with 2 or 3 simple things. Thinking about how you can better barricade your room if you are indeed forced to lock down and be stuck there. The next one would be, how do you, as a student or as a teacher, when, how, and where are you going to make the evacuation process help make that decision, or very tough decision, and where would you go? And the last one is, if you had to engage the intruder, what would that look like, instead of just waiting? These are all the sort of national and agencies that back this new strategy of how to prepare for a lockdown, or in alternatives to lockdown. And then the last slide is really what's common sense for all of us already, and I think we do this a great job in this district, is building relationships. And we're just basically want you to know that that's probably the foundation of our safety plan, is making sure that every kid feels like there's someone an adult in the building that they can come and talk to in these times of crisis. And always thinking that this is how we stop these horrible crises from happening in the first place. So, at least that's our philosophy.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I would add that this coming summer, Chief Williams is sending a couple of his officers to this same training so that they can learn more about it and figure out ways that, obviously we can go about this in a organized way. We are not wanting this adjustment to be half-cocked. We don't want to just rush into it. We really need time to work with our staff and faculty and students, and this next year will be a lot of practicing about this. It's a fine line, because on one hand we want to practice, on the other hand we don't want to instill fear or the idea that it's very likely that we will have some horrific shooting in our schools. The odds are actually way against that happening. So on one hand, we want to be as prepared as we can, have as many options as we can to keep everybody safe. We also don't want to, in our effort to drill and promote some refinements, to have our students and our employees and parents feel as if every day is a crapshoot. It's not a crapshoot. So maybe with that said, that was very good, so thank you all for that. Is there anything you want to mention that we're okay? Okay, so I guess we'll start with the school board with questions about any of this or responses, and then if you want, Susanna, we could open it up to the audience.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, thank you.
So you maybe just answered this, but have we transitioned to, this is the training and the practice that we are undertaking right now, or we're moving in this direction?
We are not there now.
Okay.
We're just beginning to have conversations, more conversations. We're feeling that this is logical and it's the right direction, but we are not just, this is going to take a lot of rehearsing and talking and running through things. And some of us have been wondering, maybe some of this training should be done after the school day, so that students don't have to be part of all. I mean, obviously some of it, we do want them to be a part of it, but they don't need to be part of all of it. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, our teachers have said clearly that they want more training, no matter what we do. We certainly agree with that. So, as Nate said, we don't think that what we've been doing it just makes a lot of sense. It's too simple. It isn't thoughtful enough, it doesn't give enough options. So we're just gradually wanting to move this direction, but we don't want to get ahead of the police. We want to be doing this together, and the chief will know more about his feelings about it and how it could be rolled out after his officers attend this academy over the summer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, does this protocol apply as well? I would imagine it does, but apply to elementary school level?
Oh, right.
This is the full school, not
Right.
just the high school.
Oh, right.
Right, I just want to clarify that, because the idea of the, obviously it would be modified, but the idea of the kids getting involved and, confrontational is quite,
No, right,
Something
no,
different.
no, it's gotta be age appropriate. And most of the things that are on this list, short of confrontation, can be adjusted and should be for the age of the children.
yeah.
Let me be real clear, we have zero interest here in arming our teachers. If that isn't clear, let me make it clear. We're going there at all. What we want to do is, first of all, as Nate said, put most of our energy into developing and maintaining, and this district has that now, but you got to keep working at it, is a district where there's a tremendous amount of respect and attention paid to every child to the degree possible. That's really our best, I think, response, is having people feel known and safe and valued and a part of something. I mean, that would go a long way. But we think that there could be, especially at the high school level, where confrontation it would never be your first choice, but it could happen. Even if you haven't planned it, it could happen. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there are teachers now in our district who have in their classroom objects that, if it were necessary, they would be willing to use that in a way to defend their students. And I'm talking about things like a baseball bat or a 2x4 or something, I don't know, but no one should think that that's what we want to do. I'm just saying that we want to get past the idea that we've done all that we can do by locking the doors and turning off the lights. That's not all we can do. And I don't think we're wed to Alice. It isn't like we're going to get tattoos or anything. I say Alice. We're just saying that a lot of the concepts there make sense to us.
Have there been any incidents throughout the country where this has been in effect and been?
There's a lot of Midwestern states, I believe it's Ohio or Indiana, that have already adopted it statewide, and that's their common practice. Once again, I'm not sure why the Northeast seems to lag a little bit behind in the process, but it is accepted in different state levels.
I'm just wondering, sadly, if it's ever been had to be used in a live situation.
I don't have the answer.
Question, Howard, or Mr. Carpenter. In reference to windows, I know most of our schools are one floor story. So getting out the window, are they wide enough with egress? Can be easily open to go out the window?
Well, actually, we have a number, I think in all of our buildings, we have second floors. And that going out those windows isn't going to work.
Yeah.
The bottom floor, yes, that could happen. You could get out easily out most of our classrooms are on the bottom floor, if that was your objective.
Yeah. And in reference to the doors, what kind of mechanisms are there? I mean, there's social media out there, and I see that they have barricades that locks the doors more than just one lock on the door on the hatch.
Yeah.
Do we know that? Will we invest in that?
Let me ask Mr. Schwartz to describe, we have a variety of different doors. They swing different ways, they lock different ways, but do you want to speak in general about what we have and where we're headed with doors?
We have a lot of different styles of doors. Where I'm seeing both the elementary and the high school both have classroom doors that swing outward. And we can still put a dead latch or something that somebody could throw, a teacher or substitute could throw, and lock that door, and not have to do like a full-scale renovation to the school to have all new doors put in and open inward. Where my focus is the middle school and the elementary school have a lot of glass in their doors, a very large
Yeah.
piece of glass, where the high school is more of a narrow, safety glass. I believe the glass there needs to be addressed, along, you don't really wanna invest the money in high-security locks if you're not gonna address the glass that could just be broken and somebody can reach in and open the door themselves. So there's a combination there that has to be worked together. But some doors, like I said, in the high school, we can go with just a security upgrade of a deadbolt or something in that instance.
I've also seen there, up to us what extreme we want to go. There are some rooms, classrooms have a barricade in the corner that can be used as a reading room in the daytime, but it could be also bulletproof and soundproof and all that stuff. And I do not see that necessary for the high school, because the high school students, middle schools can run in and go, but definitely in the lower schools, that's probably necessary if we can look into that. If money may not be an issue.
Right, we could do that. I mean, the chief is here, he knows more about this than anybody in the room, but what I've heard is that when a shooter comes in, he is moving along. They don't want to spend any time struggling, wasting time trying to fight their way into a room. If they can't get in, then they're moving on, and they're just on a path. And so I think that we'd be better off spending our energy and money on securing the doors than what happens if they get in that door and then having a second layer of safety. I think we're better off, I think that if they can't get in quickly, they're moving on.
Okay.
And so I'm more concerned about those doors, the outside, the doors that get in the classroom than about anything that is in the classroom.
Yeah.
And that's, again, the more that we can barricade those rooms and they get frustrated, they can't get in, they're gonna say, the heck with this, I'm moving on.
Okay, but in the case that he showed us an example, the library,
Yes,
so the people went under the desk,
right,
as opposed to going to another room or going through another window.
right.
So in those situations, if there's no other option, what do you do then?
Well, if there's, first of all, I don't know. If you're in a room and you have no options, you haven't got any windows you can go out, and you haven't got any doors you can go out, I would do everything I could to barricade my door, and that I would do what I could if that person got in to deal with them.
Okay,
That's what I think most of our teachers would do. They would just do their best to secure the room, and then they do their best to protect the kids.
okay. Last question, great job, great research, that's following the standards across the country. When will this be ready to be taught and implemented to students?
Well, I'm gonna say we can start this next year. Don't you all agree with that?
It's a long time.
Pardon me?
Big steps that are occurring right now that are huge is teachers are just looking at the space that they work in and thinking about how they can better secure their classrooms.
That's being done now.
Egress points and just the conversations are, I would call it training in process already. Incorporating the students, I think we probably would need to really be much more thoughtful in our planning, and it would be in the fall.
Okay.
Other more questions from the board? John?
Could you sort of just put it in a context of where we're sort of going all across security? I mean, I think we talked about, we had the incident with the gas bill, and so some of this all wraps around to, different kinds of evacuations and overall preparedness.
Right.
Sort of where we are now and where we want to go and how we handle all of those together, because it's like you practice them in different, evacuations kind of look similar.
Right.
Not all the same, and it's an important sort of skill to have and understand. And the same thing on the communication side. The communications kind of need to look the same, because that's another real important element, and we're not quite where we want to be. Could you sort of put it in a bigger context for this sort of emergency preparedness?
Well, the communication is a glaring weakness, and we recognize that, and we've made gains this year. We're thinking of next year or even later this year, getting into a system, I won't bore you with the name of it, but it's a system that goes on your cell phone, and it really is kind of like a modern walkie-talkie that could allow our administrators in all the buildings to be in communication with each other at the snap of a finger. Right now, we have dead zones in all of our schools, and even with what we have, we can't communicate very well at all. So we're working on communication. Communication also includes teachers. I think teachers have been in the dark, so not totally, but they have not been informed as much as we want them to be about what's going on. So communication all around, parents as well. I think that we're making gains this year on that. We are looking at the entrances to Pond Cove and the middle school. We see those as obvious priorities to have the entrance to those be a place where adults greet and welcome and confirm people coming in. We also recognize that some of our doors, we have multiple doors outside in all of our schools, and especially at the upper grade, the high school, I would say, there's a tendency for students to, at times, to jam those doors to be able to get in and out. You know, they're going to go out to the car, hop back in. Well, those doors are jammed, anybody can get in, not just the student getting back in. So we're trying to figure out ways to have everybody, our custodians and our staff, everybody pay attention to those certain doors, check them, not just leave that up to one person, but everybody sharing that. But we think that's a big deal, getting in. We want people to come in one way and leave the same way. So those are some obvious things we're doing. Again, we're wanting to practice more, real practicing, in the building. We haven't done nearly enough of that. So those are things that are kind of in the works right now.
Great.
Okay.
I know that community services is no longer under the school's purview, but that's another area, especially for the town and Chief Williams, to also be included in our communication, because we're all on the same campus.
Right. At that and the pool.
And the pool.
The
right.
pool, here's the thing I just don't want to say, because I don't want to point out things that are things that need attention, but we realize that there is improvement that can be made with the pool and the community center, and we want that. If they've got a problem, we want to know about it, and vice versa. So, yes, we want to have everybody working more as a team. I don't know who did the planning, but to have the fire and the police within a rock's throw of all three of our schools is such a benefit. I mean, this is really lovely arrangement. Do you want to go to the public?
I just want to say one more thing, sorry, before we go to the public. I want to say, before I lose my chance, to thank you to you and everybody on the committee, the bigger and the smaller, who've been meeting regularly for a
Yeah.
week, for a
Thank
year.
you.
It's really hard.
These
for us.
people are the ones that are really cracking the whip, but
It's really something to sit here and hear this talked about the way it is, and I can only imagine when you're faced with it weekly, monthly, how much of a, emotional drain it can be, and it's something we have to deal with and face. So I thank you very much
Thank you.
for your perseverance in something so hard. So yes, I guess at this point, if the public would like to ask questions and answers, have answers, you can.
and is it broader than Alice, just in general?
Yes, in general. So, yeah, so if you are interested in posing questions or comments, please come to the podium, just say your name and your street address, and go from there.
Hi, how are you? I'm Andrea Clayman, I'm on 16 Woodcrest Road. I was just wondering if we have considered having a professional consulting firm help us with the security?
I don't believe we have, ma'am.
Okay. I mean, I presume there are consulting firms that look into this and
Yeah.
may
I
have
actually
expertise.
think there also, I've heard from a couple of members of the community who have a background in this, and we could take them up on their offers to look at things as well. But perhaps between Mr. Schwartz and the chief, we could think about that. I mean, it's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Hello, David Trigelsky. As you pointed out, the likelihood of an event is very small. One question I have and concern is when there is an event that is similar to Florida, when there's multiple casualties, what is communicated to the children that is age appropriate at the individual schools? And the, if you will, the bubble there is increasing anxiety of the children that will distract from coming to school for, which is learning.
Right. Well, I think that I would maybe ask Jason to step in here. I mean, we want to, as I said earlier, not add to children's fear and anxiety. Probably our youngest students, I doubt there's even a conversation that's brought up by any adult talking about this at the elementary school at all. I think that by the time the children get to the middle school, they are so in tune with media and cell phones and internet that they probably are beginning to become aware. And my guess is they have conversations among themselves and with their advisors at school and teachers. I think that happens. And at high school, we know that there's a great deal of awareness and discussion in classrooms, among teachers, with teachers. I mean, it's part of their reality. But I think we're doing our best to protect the youngest children from the fear of all this. I just don't see a good reason to do that. I don't know if I'm answering your question, sir.
It's a bit of a philosophical question. I would say that if you have an elementary school student and they have an older sibling,
Right,
then they are getting that communication in elementary schools.
Right.
So I asked my fourth grader, informed my fourth grader what happened in Parkland.
right.
And then she did mention that kids were talking about it. So it is filtering down to the elementary school level.
Right,
And kids, whether they're listening to NPR with their parents on the radio.
Right.
Or see a copy of the newspaper, I would say that elementary kids are very much in tune with these.
I can see where that could happen. I have to, I have confidence that if a student talks about their bewilderment or their fear about all this at Pond Cove, I think our teachers and guidance personnel and administrators will appropriately respond, but I don't think that we're having class discussions about this. And again, I think our approach has been pretty much, let's not add to the anxiety that they have, and we trust that parents are having conversations at home with their children. I don't know, do you want to speak about what you're doing at the school, Jason?
I can,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, so Pond Cove, kindergarten through fourth. So we have agreed, talked and agreed as a staff, so we're not initiating any conversations about any tragic events. But knowing, like with any tragic event, knowing that there's trickle down from older siblings and perhaps some level of knowledge even from our youngest learners, we have prepared teachers, administration working with the guidance department and the social workers, prepared them for how to field some questions for individual students who may have some anxiety and offer support for those students. Because it's inevitable that some child will bring this up, but we're ready for that, much like the letter that I sent home to Pond Cove families a few weeks ago around how to talk to children about tragic events. So we train our teachers in a similar way, but we don't initiate conversations about it. But we do know it happens. Does that help? Okay.
I'm Becky Brosnan, 7 Patricia Drive. I brought some information from the Be Smart campaign, which goal of reducing gun violence and death from children getting their hands on guns. And I just wanted to bring some handouts along.
Thank you.
I figure dangers at the school are gonna start with kids getting their hands on things at home, and so the safer we can be as a community, the safer our schools will be. So I've got things here on just generally tips for keeping firearms secure in your home, talking about responsible gun storage with other parents, which is, I think, an important thing that I'm trying to force myself to have those conversations before my daughter goes over to a friend's house for a play date. Hey, by the way, you know, if you have guns in your home, are they secure, are they locked? I think it's just as important as asking about food allergies or pets. So I'm trying to force myself and expand the radius a little bit so that those conversations happen more regularly among the community, and also just talking to children about guns. So if I can leave these here.
Please.
For people to just grab, they're helpful for parents and teachers.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just want to make one comment. Thank you very much for bringing this to us and also sharing your choice of words in that you have to force yourself to ask these questions of other parents. It's not an easy question, but you're right. If you look at it pragmatically, you know, that's the way to look at it. It's like a food allergy. I think that's a good analogy. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sarah Crawford. I live on Mitchell Road. And I've had a couple of conversations with friends in the last 24, 48 hours that have been surprising. And so I just want to share kind of my thoughts on the general safety of the schools from a standpoint that's really hard to, it's this line that I feel like I've crossed. And that's, I don't want to live in this kind of world. None of us do, and I totally recognize that. But I'm coming to the realization that we do. Like, I never want to have to say to anyone in this room or this community, my thoughts and prayers are with you. Like, it just seems unacceptable. And so, in saying that, having our kids feel safe in schools, I think, has also crossed a line. And we don't want kids to have to walk through metal detectors or barriers but my feeling now today, as opposed to 2 weeks ago, is that I would feel safer if my kids were in an environment like the airport, major sports coliseums. Like, this isn't, we're not new at this. A lot of times when there's gun-free zones, people have put up actual physical devices. And I know we're thinking a lot about the environment that we want to create for our kids, but I think the physical environment, I really hope we address in some way. And bulletproof glass, metal detectors, and again, my kids, I think today, I have high school students that I know would feel safer in the school if there was a locked area, if there was a metal detector. So it's completely changed, and I hate that it's changed the safe rooms. You know, I hate that that's where we are, but I think I'm finally really acknowledging that's where we are, and that's what we have to do to keep our kids as safe as possible. And that doesn't mean that something's still not gonna happen. But if we haven't done everything that we can to keep our kids safe, our most valuable assets in everybody's life, you know, it would just be a shame. So I just felt like I needed to say that I hope that we're looking at the physical parts of all of this as much as the emotional.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you all for what you're doing.
Thank you.
So, may I respond to that? And my response is not to diminish your point. It's just that I actually think that one of the most powerful things we can do to assure safety is to stress the importance of reporting things that you hear or see that seem potentially problematic or dangerous. I think that may be the most effective way we can to nip some of this in the bud. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Can I say something to that?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it touched me, your comments. I'm going to tell you a story, basically, and I'm originally from Afghanistan, and I worked in Afghanistan, and my kids were there too. And working in Afghanistan, working with the UN, in our households, guest house, we had bunkers. And our workplace, we had bunkers. And then I brought my kids over there too for schools. And I wasn't worried so much about the schools there. But whenever there was a bombing going on, like suicide bombs on the roads, that's what would scare me the most. Is quickly get up, get to the phone, get the teachers, get all that. And it was uncomfortable, of course, not the way of life. And coming back to this country, coming back to Cape Elizabeth, to discover this in America, again, it's just devastating. I don't want to say I'm ready for it, because this is my least expectation of it, of all places. So unfortunately, it is reality. Like to the earlier lady comment, we have to do individually educating one another, whether it's a play days, whether it's a dinner table conversation. I agree with our gentleman there too. My kindergarten student is hearing things from the high school. I have kids, the oldest one's in college and the youngest one is in kindergarten, and I have 3 in between. So they do listen to one another. They have cousins. So it's a bigger picture, it's a reality. And unfortunately, this stuff will help us in this community, but we need to think about other communities around the state, around the country as well. It's a bigger issue. So whenever you get an opportunity to go to the education conference or teacher conference, to make sure that this is a priority for discussion as well. And do as much as you can, setting your team for these purposes as well. Thank you.
Bill Gross, CVU Avenue. I have been in the school when we've had the lockdown drills. I'm a volunteer physics tutor upstairs in Dr. Efron's classroom. And I've been sitting there in the classroom when you have the drill, and you can't help but think, what would you do and what would you feel like if this were the real thing, if it weren't a drill? And because of my background, I'm sitting in the classroom when we had the drill, and I'm thinking, every bone in my body is saying, this is the wrong thing for me to be doing, to be sitting here. Back in, from 1968 to 1971, I was a lieutenant in the Marine Corps, and I served a tour in Vietnam as a rifle platoon commander. And I'm sitting in the classroom upstairs thinking, I shouldn't be in this classroom. I should be going out and attacking, if it was the real thing, in the very, very unlikely event. My best thing for me to do is to run outside the classroom and attack the person who's shooting. But I would never want to do that, and I would be ineffective if I didn't have a gun in my hand. And while I'm thinking there's no way in the world I would ever want to carry a gun in school, I'm here in school 100 to 120 days a year. There's no way in the world I would ever want to carry a gun in school, because I'd be paranoid, I'd spend more time worrying about where it was and was it secure, and I'd lose half the time I would want to be teaching physics to kids. So I would never want to do that. I'd be very uncomfortable if any other teachers or school employees had guns. Just the fact of having guns in school and people walking around with them would be very, very uncomfortable feeling for me. But at the same time, if there was a safe up on the 3rd floor, I'm up in room 316, if there was a safe nearby, it was locked, and there was a pistol inside that safe, and if then, again, obviously very unlikely possibility that something happened, I would think that what I would want to do would be to run outside the classroom, get out in the safe, open the safe, pull out the pistol, load it, and then try and find whoever was shooting our children and stop them. And I don't know if that's really a feasible alternative, because I agree with when the superintendent, when you said there's no plans to arm teachers, I think that's a very bad idea. I would not want to be armed. Even with my back, I was very comfortable for 3 years being in the company of teenagers armed with machine guns and real assault rifles, and I was very comfortable carrying loaded weapons around all the time. But I would be unbelievably paranoid and would never want to carry a loaded weapon in Cape Elizabeth High School. But if it was locked up in a safe, so that if I'm here for 100 days or 1,000 days over 10 years, if it was locked up in a safe and I had access to that safe if anything ever happened, is that an alternative we want to consider? There probably would be some other, either teachers or school employees who might have a somewhat similar background. And I don't know if that's really a realistic option to consider. But when you look at the Alice, when you get down to the counterpart, my idea of countering isn't to sit in Dr. Efron's classroom with a baseball bat waiting for something to come in. It's, with my background in the Marine Corps, it's the wrong thing to do. The right thing to do is to attack the attacker.
Right.
And now, I don't know if there's any physical way or feasible way or realistic way we could consider putting this into the plan, but if it was at least, it would at least be worth talking about it. Maybe it's still unrealistic when we would throw it out, but some version of what I'm talking about might be something we wanna at least put on the table and discuss, and either include in the plan or just discard and say it's really an unrealistic idea.
Thank you very much.
I just want to comment, without getting into your suggestion per se, I'm just referring back to Howard's comment about how fortunate we are that we're all on one campus, including the police. I think, not all towns are so lucky, so without, further commenting on what you're suggesting, I just want to point that out again.
I own a childcare here in Cape Elizabeth, and we don't get a lot of the same messages that parents get, so it makes it very difficult when we've told all the children, please come to our school. Parents, get them off the campus as fast as you can, get them to our school, but we're not getting the notice that they're arriving, so we don't have an idea that the bus is coming, or we need 3 teachers in the school each room, so it would be nice to be left in the loop somehow, and a lot of parents are great about informing us, hey, our kids are getting dismissed. Do you have somebody there? But
Okay.
if you don't have it, it's a shock to us when,
Ma'am, if you could get us your contact information.
we've been told that we can't be on it because we're not parents.
Okay. I still would appreciate having it.
We've tried.
Yeah.
What's the name of your daycare?
It's Ocean House at the farm.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We'd love to be on any look.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Hi, J.B. Garvin, Oakhurst Road. I have a question that's admittedly a little bit peripheral to the main part of the conversation today. But part of responding, and I think, Howard, you addressed the notion of raising awareness and people just being more attuned to this issue. So I think most people are aware that there are some planned activities, student-led activities, for in the next couple of weeks, that are designed to raise awareness around this issue. So I was curious, while we have the building administrators here, I didn't know if some or all of you could speak to how that's being addressed in your schools, what messages the children are receiving, and just how you plan to handle those situations when they come up.
May I just, for anybody who doesn't know about this, give a little bit of an overview? So sadly, after the Parkland shooting, the students in that community called for a national walkout of students from schools, both, I think they primarily were looking at high schools and colleges, at 10 o'clock, whatever time, 10 o'clock in their time zone. And they would, the request was the students protest, go outside, walk out, do what they think makes sense, and that they do this for 17 minutes in honor of the 17 people who died in Parkland. And I don't know if it was any more specific than that. It wasn't, I guess I'll just leave it at that. So with that as kind of so students across the country are thinking about this, and as well as their teachers, and You'll hear about what each of our schools are planning about that now. So you want to start with the high school, Jeff?
Sure, so I'm Jeff Shedd, I'm the high school principal. And over the February break, I met with a couple of students who reached out to me, and then we've had a couple of additional meetings since then. And we will be getting a letter home to parents very soon, but it's been sort of an evolving situation. But I think as of yesterday's meeting, what's basically going to happen as I currently understand it and envision it, and I'm really trying to make whatever the students wish to do be a student-led event. So at 10 o'clock on Wednesday next week, which is a month from the Parkland shooting, there will be a walkout of students. And I believe, well, I'm quite confident that the walkout will be centered around Hannaford Field. And I will certainly be there. Nate Carpenter, I'm sure, will be there, and we will have other teachers who are there as well. We are not making it into a school-wide event, organized event, because the students actually prefer, and I respect this, to have some reality or some sense of that it is an actual walkout. It's a protest, not a protest about the school, but it's a protest about gun violence in America. So I don't want to steal the kids' thunder about what they're specifically preparing, but they're being really thoughtful. I think it's partly going to be to honor the 17 who were killed in Parkland, and I'm sure there will be references to other school shootings that have taken place earlier. And there are some other things around gun safety, and I think the overriding take-home message for kids will be one that we've begun to talk about here as well, about the importance of bystanders, the importance of, if you're concerned about a student in school, say something about your concerns to a significant adult in school. I think it's going to be a little bit longer than 17 minutes. It's probably going to be closer to 30, but that's fine. So there's not going to be any disciplinary consequences to kids, and we've been working very cooperatively and constructively together, but that's the lead that I'm following from them, and I think it's in wonderful hands. And they've got a nice, balanced program that they do want to put on. And anybody, I think the kids would back me up, that anybody who's interested in coming, you're more than welcome to come. If the weather is really bad, it might be taking place in the gymnasium instead, but we're hoping for not a day like tomorrow is going to be and Thursday is going to be, but more spring-like weather. But there will still be something that happens.
I'm Troy, from the principal at the middle school. Kind of echo most of the things that Jeff just said. It's a little unique being a 5 through 8 middle school. I think there's a difference of what's appropriate for 5th and 6th graders to maybe 7th and 8th graders. I've definitely had 4 active students, 2 from 7th and 2 from 8th grade, that have been in my office talking to me a lot about this, and they want to participate at some level, and that has kind of been a moving target. I have written a letter home to parents 3 times, and I've changed it every time. So we're kind of in the process. They know that we need to come to some resolution on this. We had talked about joining the high school students, and they're at Hannaford Field. I think that is evolving a little bit now into more of doing a similar event, but closer to the middle school, maybe out front, in front of the school, near some of those planter areas where someone could stand up on it and maybe read some of the names of the victims of Parkland, and maybe the short bios that I think the high school students have prepared. So that's part of the plan right now for 7th and 8th grade students. And again, I'm really trying hard to not control that situation, but I think they need a little more guidance than what maybe the high school will have. So we're anticipating the same thing. It's not a requirement that all students would participate, and students will be supervised in either participating or not participating. And I have teachers I know that want to participate with them. So we're going to work hard to accommodate pretty much everybody for that. 5th and 6th grade has been a slightly different task or challenge for us, and the teachers are really taking that on, and they're doing more of a plan of, during that same time period, working on some things around kindness, acceptance, tolerance, acts of kindness. They're kind of planning a program around that all students will take part in, to really work on the community building of our schools, and knowing that if people feel connected, it's usually a safer place to be. So that's kind of the latest update. There should be something coming home, my goal is by tomorrow, but I'm really careful to not take over and do that for them. I think it's important that they have the ownership of it, so.
Okay. Jason Mangiarides, principal of Pond Cove. And so at the elementary level, K to 4, so I have met with my staff, had some meetings with guidance and social work, and we have agreed as a staff to not initiate conversations and to not step outside of our routine for that day. We really kind of made that final decision today. And so what we are doing is, we talked a lot about, when I think about what Howard said about one of the best preventions is relationships and building relationships and respect. We talked a lot as a staff about how we do that within our curriculum, within our guidance curriculum in other areas. And so, again, we're planning to, on that day, on the 14th, continue with our routine, prepare teachers for ways to, we talked a little while ago about how it's inevitable that a elementary child may have an older sibling and may mention this. We're going to talk with teachers and prepare about how to address that, and if any students need additional individual support, we'll be able to provide that for them. But that's our plan, and so I will be sending a letter. I'm drafting a letter currently to all Pond Cove families, kind of explaining that we will not be initiating any activities that day, but it'll also explain the ways that we teach empathy and kindness, and so that's how we're addressing it.
I would just add a few more things, if you don't mind. Some people have wondered, what if a family wants to come and retrieve their children and take them outside and do whatever they feel is appropriate? We certainly welcome that. Please, if you feel that you want to come and get your children, it would have to be your children, not your neighbor's children. And please know that the doors are wide open, and we would certainly support that on a family level. Also, we've been asked, what about teachers? Will they have the opportunity to be involved in terms of participation? And absolutely, I think what I heard Mr. Shedd say yesterday, which makes sense to me, is that if there are students that do not wish to be involved, they want to stay in their classroom and continue on with their lessons, teachers would certainly stay there and keep that very much alive, that lesson. If the class dumps and everybody decides they want to get involved or observe or be part of this, then the teacher has not got a class, and then he or she will decide what they want to do. And I'm guessing a lot of them will want to go out and support the children, but it's just going to be a bit fluid. I think it's fair to say we really believe in what our students stand for here and what they're trying to accomplish, and I think it's right that the students have a hold of the steering wheel on this one.
Yes.
Maureen Clancy, I live at 11 Hemlock Hill Road. I'm sorry I was late. I'm a creature of habit. Of course, I went to the so I missed your presentation on Alice. I'm reluctant to ask questions. If you've already answered this, just tell me and I can talk to you about it later. But I had a question about the social media piece and how we're monitoring this, and how as parents, for instance, if I had read something or my child had brought something to my attention over the weekend, like this episode, what would I have done? I probably would have sent Mr. Shedd an email, not knowing what else to do, but what if he didn't read it? What should parents be doing, or where should we be reporting or making these reports? And I guess I'm curious to know, prior to this, which happened after the Parkland incident, so obviously we were heightened aware of this issue. have these issues been brought to our attention before? How have we addressed these types of social media pieces, and what is our plan to ongoing monitor our students in this social media aspect and what is heard or commented on? We also know that once something is out there, whether it's true or not, the kids are going to spread like wildfire, and kids are going to be accused of things whether or not they're guilty of them. So there's also how do we protect our students in that social media environment as well. And then of course, as this woman had said earlier, I'm very, of course, want our students to participate on March 14th. But I also, the first thing that came to my mind is that we're going to send all of our kids outside. Everybody knows this is going to be happening. Is that a safety risk? And have the police been involved, and are they aware to prevent that? And my last comment would just be, personally, about guns in schools, I just feel that the chance of something bad happening with a gun in the school is much more likely than the gun being used to protect our students, just as I personally feel about guns in the home. So I hope that we would not go that way, and we would leave that to the police officers. Thank you.
Well, I mean, you asked a lot of questions, and which one do you want to answer? So let me just take a shot at some of it, but a lot of us are going to have to be helped. I mean, I think the first thing you asked, if I understood it, was where do we go if we've got a concern? And I would say that always feel if you need to call 911. I mean, the worst thing that could happen is they're going to basically talk you down. But do you agree, Chief? If you want to run it by somebody, which I think is always a really good idea, ask somebody, what do you think about this? I heard this or saw this. Do you think that I should? I mean, that's probably a real smart idea. I mean, I would say that most of us are very available. I mean, we like it or not, kind of live with these cell phones. So most of us have a cell phone on the district webpage. You can find who we are and write us an email or call us. I mean, I don't live here. I mean, I would say you could call me day or night at my home, and I really mean it. And I think that we all feel that way. And our numbers are out there. I mean, I'll give you my number if you want it. Do you want it? So it's two. Okay. Well, when you get it charged, call me. Regarding social media, it's so far over my head. I mean, it's so far more advanced than I am. I don't know how to control it. I mean, I think that one thing that we need to talk about with our students and our children is this is serious. The stakes are really high. Don't get too cute. Don't get clever, and realize that other people don't be careful with the idea of what you thought you meant by that. How are other people going to take it? That's where we are today. And I mean, if you're concerned about March 14th, be concerned about every football game next fall. Where do you end? You know, we've heard about every soccer game. I mean, it just goes on. I mean, we just can't. We can't cave in. I think we've got to be strong. What were your other questions? What were some of your other questions?
Just the monitoring of the social media and the reactions.
Do we have? Is Noel here? Do we monitor this stuff?
Not, I don't know how you would even begin to do that.
Probably the kids.
I think what you do, I think the important thing you do is the people who monitor it are peers monitoring one another, and then you work as hard as you can to build a culture where if you, as happened recently, you see something, you say something. And I agree, 911 is the surefire way to get a quick response. I know when I called the other day, I had a Cape Elizabeth police officer in my home within 3 minutes of placing a call. So they're really good. because there's no guarantee that any of us are going to be around on a particular night, but there's a guarantee that 911 is going to get an answer on the phone, like, really fast, and they're gonna take it really seriously and respond really quickly. But in terms of social media, I would be doing a disservice to try to create any sort of a sense that school officials are monitoring social media or have any capability to do that, because we don't.
Oh, I know one of your other questions. Oh, it was a point, maybe not a question, about due process, which I really appreciate hearing. I mean, I think we have to all not rush to this instinct to overreact to what we think has happened, what we heard has happened. Have confidence in your administration and your board that we are going to provide due process, we're going to be fair, and we're going to appropriately discipline when it's warranted, and have confidence that we have to also be willing to trust our young people and recognize that sometimes they make serious mistakes, and that part of our opportunity is to help them learn and grow from those mistakes. And when students have paid their dues, that, like the adults, I always feel so bad when somebody has got a felony as an adult, and it's a rap that they live with the rest of their entire life after they've paid for that by prison or whatever happens to them. Let's give people another chance, and especially our youth. I mean, if somebody in our school makes a serious mistake and they finally work their way back in, I hope that we all, rather than be frightened of them, that we embrace them. We put an arm around them and say, welcome back, glad you're here. You know what I mean? Yeah, thank you.
Howard, just to follow up, I think one of Maureen's other questions that I remembered was wondering about the 14th, if there was police involvement and support, if the police was there to aware and.
Well, there's a chief.
Right.
I have a meeting tomorrow with high school students.
Okay.
So we've already planned that, and they're gonna fill me in on what's going on. I do not know anything about middle school or anything like that.
You don't want to know.
But, yes, they reached out to me, and we bounced some times back in a small afternoon.
Thank you for that.
Howard, if I could just expand on a little bit of what you had said, sort of echoing something you had said earlier about students who may have an issue, and you were talking a little bit about the attitude of some of the school district and repeat suspensions, and actually looking out there at some of the data and some of the folks who end up having these kinds of problems in school. There's often a long history of multiple suspensions and disciplines that fail, and that you were sort of taking an approach that, correct me if I'm wrong, is that away from that to the extent it's prudent, and to really look at how do you get people back and integrated into the community after they may have made an error. As part of the way you're actually looking at addressing community and building those relationships and those sorts of things. And I thought that was actually really insightful and useful to know that that is our approach.
It's part of trying to provide a safe environment. Right. That may be it.
Is that it? Well, thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. I know this is a really important subject and one that's going to keep on going, and I encourage you to stay involved in all matters, all workshops, but always feel free to email any of us if you have further thoughts or questions. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.